So recently, Reform UK had its, well, conference, surprisingly, not, in line with the rest of the political conferences. It likes to be different, probably because it's got no MPs, so, it can afford to do this type of thing when it wants. But it has very much continued the tradition of UKIP of having their conference in Doncaster. And partly, I think that reason is because UKIP always wanted to sort of focus its efforts of concentrating really in on one region and sort of building that region and having that as its base. And Reform UK seems to want to sort of continue on in that issue. But there were some very interesting comments that came from this. And it was mostly from the reporter who was covering the Reform UK conference, because when he was speaking to people at the conference, they were asking one question: where was Nigel Farage? So normally this question is asked, well, what's Farage going to do at a general election? The Conservatives don't know. Reform is being very coy about it. Richard Trice himself is being very, he might return, he might not return. He's just the complete Scarlet Pimpernel is our Farage. And Farage himself has gone, well, I might join the Conservatives, I might join Reform, I might be, who knows where I might be. Ooh, basically scaring the bejesus out of all the Conservative MPs about what he might do. But like I say, when we get a general election, we'll find out. But what's interesting, though, are these comments that were had from these people who were attending the conference, because they were very, very much wanted Farage to be the Reform guy. That they are talking about Reform replacing the Conservative Party. So we'll see. Like I say, we'll see what happens when it comes to a general election, and ultimately what happens in the wake of that general election to see if Reform can actually capitalize on any significant Conservative defeat. Time will tell. But for the now, we're going to have a look at what these people had to say at this Reform conference, because I think some of these comments are quite interesting to go over. So before we do go over them, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Also, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, or you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So, as always, let's crack on into this. So, this comes from The Guardian with the title of "When's Nigel Coming Back? Farage absence looms large over Reform UK conference." On a sunny day at Doncaster Racecourse, those gathered for the Reform UK's biggest ever party conference were presented with a dazzling array of pledges to cut tax and to freeze non-essential immigration, as its leading lights published a programme to, quote, save Britain. Yet, as the sun beamed down, the shadow of one figure absent seemed to hang large over the proceedings. There was a jubilant mood at the South Yorkshire gathering as they cheered a leader. Richard Trice demands for an inquiry into vaccine harms. That will be a pointless. That will be a pointless inquiry because they are little to no vaccine harms when it was done it. But okay, appealing to that conspiracy crowd, I suppose. To break with the World Health Organization, that would be an incredibly bad thing to do. And to fire head teachers who refuse to, quote, drop critical race theory. Critical race theory is not taught at a primary school or a secondary school level. It is mainly a degree level where people would sort of encounter that. But hey, there you go, crazy plans of Reform UK. So, even from the centre stage, however, it was acknowledged that there was a big unanswered question. David White, the Barnsley South candidate, admitted he was regularly asked, When's Nigel coming back? The leaders of Reform UK, which grew out of the Brexit Party after the last election, are in a very optimistic mood after seizing at least 13% of the vote at the Wellingborough by-election, its best ever result. They believe it now confirms that national polling suggests about 1 in 10 voters may back them. Yet, despite the progress, many Reform supporters and concerned Tory MPs feel the addition of Nigel Farage could turn the party from a minor irritant to the Conservatives into an existential threat. And that is what the Conservative MPs have been continuously saying. Nigel Farage is just the ghost of, well, I don't know, the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future all at once, coming to haunt them nightly in some cases. I would hope he would come back, said Stephen O'Neill, who had travelled with his wife Sandra from Glasgow, saying, I don't think he'd be leader, but obviously Farage has got the charisma and notoriety, Sandra adds. It needs the publicity. That's what they don't get. Charlotte from Gloucestershire was attracted to Reform because of a dislike of the main parties. She was also keen for a Farage return, saying, I'd certainly like to see him, she said. He's doing a good job at getting the crowd together. He can give all the other good leaders a good run for their money. Even among the attendees, however, at the conference, there was an acknowledgement that the addition of Farage could be a double-edged, with someone saying he's a polarizing character, but that's because the media portray him as that, said Colin, an ex-Tory voter from Lancashire, who said that his former party didn't represent his views any longer, saying, I would like him to come back and help Reform, but that is not necessarily to stand as a candidate. The mainstream media would circle like vultures to destroy him. The policy platform announced in Doncaster is huge, from ending inheritance tax to replenishing the fishing fleets. Oh, that would be fun to see what the actual policy is to replenish the fishing fleets. And then ending inheritance tax. Inheritance tax started by Henry the Sixth. No. Yes, Henry the Seventh. Sorry. Again, it was Henry VII. It was one of the Henrys, but he started that because he realized that it was a good tax that would gain Britain a lot of money. It still today is one of the big things that brings in a lot of income to the treasury. Getting rid of it would open up a massive black hole. And the thing is, inheritance tax is paid by so little people, but people constantly worry about it because they're told by the Taxpayers Alliance that, oh, you're actually subject to the inheritance tax when people aren't. But there you go. So we might have to have a look at this manifesto at some point, because rebuilding the fishing fleet, be interested to see how exactly they intend to do that. So it continues. Yet the Tories on the right are very sympathetic to many of these ideas, and they believe that Farage is vital if Reform's insurgency is to be significant. He's the only one with any political nous, said one former minister. He pointed to the issues that seem to be too technical and remote, such as the Northern Ireland's Brexit mechanisms or even the interest on quantitative easing reserves given to commercial banks. Exclusive polling for the Observer by Opinion does shed light on Farage, on the Farage factor for Reform UK has at least 10% support. The level it is recorded for some time is very similar to the share of votes in Wellingsborough and Kingsborough by-elections. That is, if the leader is hailed as a breakthrough. The polls also suggest the return of Farage would make the party a bigger draw, even if the first past the post system means seizing a seat looks unlikely. Trice currently has a net approval rating of -9, but it's not bad in comparison with other leaders. But most voters do have an opinion at all that he is still likely a largely unknown outside of his party. Farage is on -19 amongst many voters as a whole, but they have a view of him amongst the Tory voters still backing the party at 39% approve of Farage, suggesting that reform could do serious damage to Rishi Sunak should Farage return to take the helm. Of course, Tory voters, 42%, said Farage returns would make them more favourable towards reform. So that is, of course, the big Tory nightmare, that if he does come back, that he does lead this insurgency against Rishi, this is going to cause him a big, big problem. So this leaves Farage with a dilemma. Should he once again return to fight for a general election, which has seen him disappointed on so many times before? Or should he, as he did recently, spend his time on money-spinning media circuits in the US? Commenting on his old ally Donald Trump's campaign for the White House, the latter opinion also leaves it far open for a bigger prize as joining the Tory party in search of a leadership should they suffer a heavy general election loss. Farage currently remains tight-lipped. And that's what a lot of people are thinking, that if they lose big, if they suffer a massive general election loss, then at that point, Farage can return and then he can just start, Reform UK under the Conservative banner. He's a Conservative candidate, but he's just saying everything that Reform UK would say, trying to push those ideas and things like that. That is why you've seen, very, very worryingly, a lot of support, the Hope Not Hate poll, backing what a lot of Conservative voters would say that they agreed with Lee Anderson. That's very worrying, because it just shows you how far to the right the Tory party, or at least the Tory party membership, has really gone. The other issue for reform is that there is still a split among those on the right who believe the Tory party is headed in the wrong direction. While some have opted to start fresh with reform, others want to stay within the Tory tent and pull it further right. This is a tactic that is now being pursued by several MPs and former Tory donors. To this group's reform's increasing support is evidence that they need to push Sunak in that direction, saying, "I hear from constituents that they want the Conservative government to be more conservative," said one senior figure on the right. They see the recent drift in society. It's kind of a modernism that they don't like. They don't like some of the characteristics of modern Britain, the automation of Britain, the decline of the traditional structures. That's what they hate the most, and they think the government should do something about it. The Tory party needs to be more Tory. Stop parroting the liberal left bollocks. Then that's obviously what the National Conservatives, certainly the popular Conservatives, would probably argue that point as well. But there are plenty of these now splinter groups trying to do exactly that, as we've seen and covered in the past. So Sunak's team do claim to be very relaxed about reform's recent performances, even though it was achieved without Farage. The only thing that surprised us in Wellingborough was that reform didn't do as well as they had thought they might, one source had said. I remember when you got UKIP getting more than 60% in Cleckheaton in 2014, and it was very clear that a vote for reform is essentially a vote for Keir Starmer. So all those votes could come back to us at a general election. And again, this matches with what we've said about the recent video about the polling numbers. Are people being, silent Tories? Are they saying, if they are asked in the opinion polls, are they saying, "Oh no, we'd vote for Labour," but when they get into the general election booth, would they instead vote Tory? We don't know. Like I say, we'll find out when the general election happens. As for the increasingly miserable left-wing, liberal wing of the Tory party, they believe that there is a confined element to the concerns expressed about the reform threat. They are not people panicking, said one former cabinet minister. They are people who want to turn the Tory party into reform or some version of it and are trying to seize on opportunities to do so. Anyone sensible recognizes that you cannot simply add the reform vote to the Tory vote and say, look, it's a new coalition. You would shed voters on the other side. People who say that there is evidence to show that we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights and start campaigning on that are being, I think, the parliamentary word is disingenuous. So interesting. Interesting to see what happens there. But some of those comments are reflecting on what's going to happen. We still don't know what's going to happen with Farage. Is he going to stay out of this contest? And is he going to come back and rejoin the Conservatives and maybe try and become their leader? It's not beyond the realms of possibility, but he might be, as a lot of people have said, he's having fun in America. He's once again brought up the idea that he should become like the ambassador to America. So we'll see what happens when it comes to a general election. Of course, we'll see what happens in the wake of that general election, but who knows? Who knows what will happen? Who knows which direction Farage will say? But it is very clear that you've got a lot of people who are part of reform who are very clearly that's we want Farage back. Where is he? But also interesting to acknowledge, one person said there that his presence would be a double-edged sword. That was, I think, an interesting comment. So maybe, well, the majority of reform do want him to come back. There's some part that wanting to sort of maybe stay away, maybe just keep him as an onside cheerleader. But until the general election happens, we don't know. So until then, as always, we'll see you all next time.